Hi, Joshua Feinberg here from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. And I want to welcome you to this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live show, where each week I answer a handful of the biggest questions that you have around your most significant sales and marketing challenges. It doesn't matter where you are on the go-to-market team, whether you're in sales, marketing, account management, product management, channel management, or maybe you're the executive sponsor and the orchestra conductor of making all of this work. And this is effective for you. This is a great place for you to also get your questions answered, regardless of where you are within the data center industry, within the data center marketplace, regardless of whether your company is, for example, a provider or an operator, like maybe co-location, wholesale, hyperscale, edge, or modular, or maybe you're from a technology company that sells to or partners with data centers, or perhaps your company specializes in something facilities related, like directly related to energy or power or environmental monitoring or something along those lines. Or maybe your company does something with capital or investment or real estate or perhaps construction. And then there's also the fifth triad of the data center industry or marketplace, the sales and marketing, the outsourced sales and marketing companies in and around the data center ecosystem. But regardless of what your individual role is, what your team does, what your company does, you're for sure in the right place if you're looking to up your game to increase your potential, your growth potential of what your team accomplishes and what your company accomplishes in this great, exciting phase of growth within the data center industry. If you don't currently subscribe to our data center related newsletter, or data center sales and marketing newsletter, it is the best way to keep up with what we're working on over at DCSMI. So if you want to make sure that you're subscribed to that, visit the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com and make sure that you subscribe to the data center sales and marketing newsletter so you can get that delivered directly to your email inbox on Sundays. So what's on the agenda for this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show? I'm first going to start by talking about how to get digital infrastructure appointments and meetings for your sales team. Then we'll look at how a data center hosting and business continuity services firm can grow in a small, congested market. Then we'll turn our attention to how to grow a co-location business in Latin America. After that, we'll take a quick break for a message from our sponsor. When we return, we'll look at how to improve carbon neutral data center lead generation. Then we'll address how a data center can market to targeted companies. And as we head down the home stretch in this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, we will look at how a network cabling solutions company can improve its sales strategy. So let's jump right in. First up, how do we get a digital infrastructure sales strategy going that helps how to get a digital infrastructure appointment meeting playbook going for the sales team? So how do we get digital infrastructure appointments and meetings for the sales team? I think it starts with figuring out where your particular company is and its life cycle and in relative maturity. In other words, do you know exactly who your ideal clients are? Do you know the products and services, the digital infrastructure products and services that they purchase from your company? Do you know the price points at which those infrastructure products and services are purchased at? How long a typical sales cycle is? How long the duration is? Do you know your basic unit economics? In other words, does your company have product market fit, PMF, so that you know exactly who the right people are, what they buy, the price points, and how frequently they purchase? And do you also have go-to-market fit? Do you know if you pour more jet fuel into your rocket, do you know that it's going to be able to carry successfully from founder-led to sales-led to larger sales teams to directors to managers, vice presidents, and scaling your sales team from a few people to a few dozen to eventually to a few hundred? If you have answers to at least some of those questions, you can deploy a strategy for getting more appointments and more meetings with much more precision. Usually for most companies, the best place to start is where you've been most successful in selling and servicing digital infrastructure. And if you're keeping up with best practices to stay competitive in the marketplace, usually the first place that there would be evidence of this is by going to your website and looking at your case studies that are up on your website. Where have you been most successful? And in an ideal scenario, you'll have one or more clusters of companies in that section of your website who have a lot in common. If they're all over the place, if there's no rhyme or reason with the companies that you've been selling digital infrastructure to and servicing digital infrastructure, if there's nothing consistent about what brings them all together, it's a lot more difficult. However, if you do find that there's commonalities, you're on your way to developing an ideal client profile, what's often abbreviated as an ICP. An ICP tells you in a very concise single page kind of definition that should fit on like one page in a Google Doc or Word doc or something like that. And it should be able to identify the geographic region that your ideal client is located in. Is it just your regional area? Is it your whole country? Is it your whole continent? Is it the whole globe? Where have you been most successful geographically? Second, it likely has a company size parameter with that as well. And when we think of company size, think of Goldilocks. What's too big? What's too small? What's just right? And a lot of times when people are just starting out an exercise like this, they're tempted to say, who's the ideal client? Everyone. Well, if it's everyone, it's no one. So we need to be more specific and identify at least what a prospect that's too small looks like and what a prospect that's too large looks like, and be realistic, self-aware about where our company does best. So we've nailed down the location, the geography. We've nailed down the company size, which if we're using a database like LinkedIn, company size is probably going to be defined in terms of number of employees. And then we need to understand their industry or their business model where we've been most successful. And where this is especially relevant is because regardless of whether you're looking at geographic coverage or whether you're looking at industries, certain regulatory things, certain compliance issues come up with certain kinds of companies and certain kinds of locations when it comes to digital infrastructure. So we need to know what your company is actually really good at selling and servicing, and back into how we're going to build a plan to get more companies like that into your sales pipeline. So we've defined the ideal client profile. Next, we need to understand in these companies, who is the most important kind of person that we need to be building a relationship with. This would be, if we think about an ideal client profile defines what you're trying to do at a company level. Buyer personas define who you're trying to build relationships with at an individual level. And they usually, what a buyer persona has in common is it's not just job titles, it's not just job functions. It's a collection, it's an amalgamation of a kind of a cluster of people that all have similar goals and all have similar challenges that they're trying to address. The way you figure out what these goals and challenges are is by doing actual research, not just pulling it out of thin air. And some of this research, a small portion of this research, can involve talking to stakeholders within your company, like on your sales team, on your account management team, on your marketing team, on your executive team. However, I'd caution you that internal research and their internal assumptions of what they see in the marketplace should maybe be about 20-25% of your overall research for putting together buyer personas. The majority of it, 75-80% or more, should come from actual research with the external stakeholders that are most similar to these ideal clients. So in a perfect scenario, you're going to do interviews face-to-face. The second best scenario is on video conference or Zoom or something like that. If you don't have the ability to do those direct interviews, usually the next best thing is looking at how they self-describe and what kinds of content that they share when it comes to like social. So looking at a basket of 10 or 20 representative people and looking at how they describe themselves on their LinkedIn profile, the kind of content that they share, what kind of conferences they go to, what kind of publications they read, common skills endorsements. And then you can take those same people and go and do a search, like a Google search or ChatGPT search or something like that. And in a perfect scenario, we're not just ingesting information about blog posts they've written or news releases they've been quoted in or articles they've been quoted in. In an ideal scenario, we're finding like podcasts and YouTube videos of conferences they've spoken at or webinars they've presented at. So not only can we hear how they've described their biggest goals and their biggest challenges, we can get intonation and body language and all the subtleties that the next best thing to actually doing these interviews. So by bringing that all together and looking for the commonalities, you'll arrive at a primary buyer persona. the most important economic stakeholder in these companies that you want to build relationships with. And then we need to be realistic enough that for significantly sized digital infrastructure opportunities, there's usually more than one person on the decision committee. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called a committee, right? So who else is on the decision committee that has a different kind of role and different kinds of interests, but it's still incredibly important? The next most important stakeholder that has to weigh in on digital infrastructure. Some cases, maybe it's a CFO or something like that. It's going to vary depending on the nature of your business, but rest assured, what distinguishes that person as a separate buyer persona is because they have different goals and they have different challenges. And once you understand your most important and second most important kind of stakeholder in these ideal client accounts, you can not only go about building your target account list of the right kinds of companies, you can go about starting to build reach with the right kinds of people in these companies. And when we show up, we're not going to go knock, knock, knock. Let's book a demo. Let's book a sales meeting. Let me come in and pitch. No. Maybe 10 or 20 years ago, you could get away with that selfish nonsense, but it doesn't work like that anymore. Because in the world that we live in today, most of the researching and the comparing options and evaluating pricing happens before you get to meet a prospect, before they're willing to talk with someone from your sales team. The latest research from Gartner found that 83% of a typical buyer's journey, researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing, now happens before sales contact. And that is a huge difference compared to as recently as 10 years ago, when CEB, the corporate executive board that has subsequently been acquired by Gartner, first did this kind of research with SiriusDecisions and Salesforce, and found at that time about 56% of a typical journey was over before sales contact. So going back about 10 years ago, your sales team got to spend about half of the sales cycle, about half of the buyer's journey with their prospects. Now they're only spending about 15 or 17% of that buyer's journey with prospects. So you're actually excluded from this process way more than you're included. And typically the only way that you're going to get included is to have your sales team show up as something other than salespeople that are just focused on closing a transaction. So your sales team needs a radical makeover and a repositioning so that they're able to show up as teachers, as consultants, as subject matter experts, as trusted advisors, and perhaps they even are able to elevate to the level of being seen as thought leaders. And for the more junior members on your team, when it comes to sales appointments and meetings, obviously they're not going to show up year one as a thought leader. But what they can do is they can be a really good student of your company's thought leadership that's created by bringing together the most brilliant minds in your company and creating this amazing content and this amazing events experiences that get at exactly the biggest goals and the biggest challenges that are consistently brought up by your most important buyer personas. And when you have your more seasoned, more veteran talent on your team creating these assets, then even the more junior members of your team should be attending those webinars and participating and helping to moderate those webinars and reading and watching all of those assets so they can be the most amazing concierge and tour guide to direct prospects in the direction of the most appropriate resource so that they're able to diagnose before they are able to prescribe. So when it comes to getting digital infrastructure appointments and meetings for the sales team, it's super important to recognize that we no longer live in a world where your sales team is going to be invited in on a regular guest if they're not adding a ton of value to this process. And the way that your sales team is able to add value to the process is they can't be perceived as wanting to just close a transaction anymore. They need to come in looking a lot more like a Big Four consultant, like a $500 or $1,000 an hour consultant that would work for like KPMG or EY or Deloitte or PwC. It's that kind of vibe, that kind of aura. And when you're able to do that, it has a game-changing impact so that you're not chasing prospects for appointments and meetings. And I suspect that the way that this question is phrased, that there's some big culture changes that need to happen in your company starting from the top down level. Your CEO, your CRO, your your VP of sales, your VP of marketing product, everyone needs to be bought into the vision of your company being seen as the go-to experts in your space. If you don't have that passion for your company to be seen as the go-to experts in your space, none of this is going to work. And you're going to be banging your head against the wall, looking for an increasingly tiny sliver of the market that buys the way they did 20 years ago. The reality is, for any one of your clients that has a smartphone, that has figured out search engines, that's figured out Copilot and ChatGPT, that understands what LinkedIn is, that understands what webinars and podcasts and YouTube and review websites are, McKinsey found 70 to 80% of decision makers now prefer a digital journey. There's only so much that you can do to bang your head against the wall and try to convince yourself that your internal champions of digital infrastructure are digital laggards. It sounds ridiculous when I say that out loud, right? You think your internal champions are going to be the edge cases that never got a smartphone, that never figured out YouTube, that don't watch podcasts, listen to webinars, go to review websites. You think your prospects are the edge cases? If you really believe that, we have bigger issues about limiting beliefs here. But if you truly take the time to build out your buyer personas, you'll get a tremendous amount of precision on what they need to learn from you to help them close the gap with their goals at an individual level, at a team level, at a company level, and close the gap with their biggest challenges that are stressing them out to no end, that are causing them to have to pull all-nighters and take time away from their friends, family, and loved ones, miss out on vacations and all these other things that are causing them immense amounts of professional stress. And the better job you can do with creating remarkable resources that help them educate and build trust along the way with them, the much better empowered your sales team is going to have much more effective appointments, to have much more effective meetings that begin relationships with where prospects are. Not where you'd like them to be a couple weeks or a couple months down the road, but where they actually are today. So the goal, 28 touch points between complete stranger and closed one new customer. So the question is, how many of those touch points are you successfully having a relationships with today? Do you truly have a good presence and awareness and consideration and decision? Or are you only showing up for decision? It's kind of like, everyone always tells me I use too many baseball analogies. So I'll give the baseball analogy and then I'll give the football analogy so it translates a little bit better outside the US. So imagine you're taking your clients to a baseball game, and for whatever reason, the stadium is incredibly hostile towards people that have the word sales on their business card, email signature, or LinkedIn profile. So you're not allowed in the stadium until the bottom of the 8th inning, despite the fact that you bought the tickets, right? Sounds a little far-fetched, but that's kind of what's going on in the world we live in today. People are so much more sales resistant and sales allergic. And if you're in if you're in Europe, if you're in Latin America, wherever, and you're taking them to a football match, imagine it's deep into the third or fourth quarter, deep into the third or fourth period before you're allowed into the stadium to sit with the clients and prospects that you brought to that game. That's what's going on. And the only way that we can get back into that journey to have a great relationship with them is to radically make over our sales team so that they're seen as consultants, teachers, trusted advisors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders. That's how you get digital infrastructure appointments and meetings for the sales team that actually help, as opposed to doing things that irritate your prospects and send them running for the hills. So do you want to help them, or do you want to chase your prospects away? Ultimately, the choice is yours, but these are company culture changes, and most of the time they have to start from the top down. Okay, next question. How does a data center hosting and business continuity services firms grow in a small congested market? So how does a data center hosting and business continuity firm grow in a small congested market? That's a great question. And I actually see this situation firsthand with companies that I consult with several times a year, most often in co-location or hosting. And the reality is, for a single location co-location business to be successful in today's marketplace with today's cost and capital structure, the reality is most of them have morphed into hybrid business models at some point, or they've just figured out scale. So a lot of companies originally got into co-location because they were web hosts 5, 10, 15 years ago. The web hosting business got severely commoditized well over 10 years ago, where you started to see the big players in the space all be billion-dollar companies. So if you weren't at least executing at the scale in the 8 or 9 figures, like I don't know where you find the nooks and crannies anymore, except getting incredibly deeply niched. Co-location is approaching that today just because there's so much saturation in so many markets. But the reality is, at the same time, you see all of the larger players and all the smaller players running up against power grid capacity issues. So the reality is, if you're truly self-aware about what your company does and where you have strategic, where you have big strengths and where you have weaknesses, a basic SWOT analysis, right? Then you're in a much better position to figure out what to do with growing the actual business. The hosting part, when you say small, congested market, the reality is most co-location and hosting companies that I talk to have to have a minimum of 2 different go-to-market strategies. They have a go-to-market strategy for local clients where they can cost effectively have face-to-face contact. And if that's the case, if you have a facility with like a nice conference room or break room or reception area where you can bring in 10, 20, 30 people at a time, 5, 6, 8, 10 times a year, then by all means, host user group meetings, host meetups, invite managed service providers, invite clusters of potential clients that all have things in common with each other, like, I don't know, CFOs of manufacturing companies or CTOs of media communications. Wherever you can win best, you can do face-to-face relatively inexpensively if all you're really looking to do is get the right people and bring them to a breakfast seminar or lunch and learn or something like that. For sure, if you haven't been doing that, you should start doing that like yesterday. And then there's a whole separate plan, usually for the single co-location or the single location hosting business continuity company, where they're marketing nationally and globally. And this is where search engine optimization, search engine marketing, LinkedIn organic, LinkedIn paid, outbound LinkedIn using LinkedIn Sales Navigator, that's a very different playbook than focusing on just local field marketing, local field events. It's a whole different kind of competency. And there could be some overlap between the two, because let's say, for example, that you're holding a lunch and learn in your conference room that has a capacity of 20 people, and you decide to make it interesting to partner with the account rep for one of the telecommunications company that come into your meet me room, or you decide to partner with a local CPA firm that does a lot of cybersecurity work or compliance work or something like that. So you have a partner, you're each responsible for filling up about half of the room. And in the course of doing that, you talk for 15, 20 minutes about something that's top of mind that you know your audience cares about. Your marketing partner also provides great editorial content for 15, 20 minutes. You both answer questions. You have some networking time before, you have some networking time after. You bring people around to do tours in your facility, whatever works best for you. So in the course of doing that, there's no reason why you can't record that 15, 20 minute session and that 15 and your partner's 15, 20 minute session and repurpose and repackage that into webinars and into videos on your YouTube channel, and repurpose from video to audio and audio to image-based content and text-based content. But that's where the extent of the overlap ends, because the reality is it's a different ideal client profile. It's a different go-to-market playbook. It's different buyer personas. But the reality is, for single location in a small congested market, when you say small, I'm thinking it's probably a second tier market, not one of the primary markets. And when you say congested, that probably means that there's crazy amounts of competition. What the crazy amounts of competition means is you have to work harder to figure out your true point of differentiation. And when I ask for differentiation, everyone always gives the stock answers like, oh, we're better, we're faster, we're cheaper. Like, okay, yeah, that would be great 20 years ago. Today, truly standing out means that you're able to differentiate throughout the full buyer's journey, because what that person just mentioned with the better, faster, and cheaper, it's only relevant in the final 17% of the buyer's journey when people are ready for sales contact. And the first 83% of the buyer's journey, where people are doing a crazy amount of research on their own, figuring out all the answers to their biggest goals and questions and challenges, figure out what the solutions are that would help them close the gap on their biggest stressors and challenges, comparing all the different options. Gartner found 83% of a typical journey is over before sales contacts. So it's incredibly important for you to figure out a way for your hosting company, business continuity company, to get in early and get in often. And the get in often is really important as well, because in a typical journey for something like hosting and business continuity, there may be 28 touch points between complete stranger and new customer. And if you're just doing one or two things like that, that leaves a lot of vulnerable surface area for other companies in your space to occupy the other 25 or 26 of those touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision. So this isn't a one and done thing. When people come to me like, we want to do some marketing, we want to do some appointment generating, we want to do some lead gen. What part of this is like someone going to the gym who wants to run a marathon and they went 3 times and they're wondering why they're still in crappy shape and can't run a mile. Well, dude, you went 3 times. You're trying to run 26 miles. You see the problem here? So we need to figure out how to get in early and how to get in often with the right people in a differentiated way. So for hosting and business continuity firm in a small congested market, we should define where we've been most successful. From where we've been most successful, like our case studies, we should be able to back into what the ideal client profile looks like. From the ideal client profile, we should be able to generate a target account list. So we figure out exactly how small this market is. Ideal client profile, you got your geographic factors, company size, probably business model, industry, something like that. And then from there, do we have a couple dozen potential companies that we want to build these relationships? Do we have a couple hundred? Do we have a couple thousand? And is there a different ICP? Is there a different ideal client profile and go-to-market that we need for the local clients versus the national and international clients? And from there, we need to understand what is keeping these folks up at 2 o'clock in the morning. What are their biggest goals? What are their challenges? What are their stressors? And how can we create amazingly helpful educational resources and events and webinars and offline webinars? So, we talked about the ones in your conference room, right? And in your foyer, your reception area. What do we do to show up as teachers, as trusted advisors, as subject matter experts and thought leaders? So to grow in a small congested market, we really have to fire on all cylinders, but recognize that most of the companies that you're competing with that have decided that they're determined to stay a single location business go wider. They take on a more breadth of services. So maybe they merge or acquire with a managed service provider or a software development firm or a CPA for an accounting firm or something like that, or a cybersecurity specialist firm, because they recognize that more than likely their ideal client profile and your ideal client profile have a heck of a lot in common, maybe pretty close to anywhere from similar to nearly identical. And by being able to get a greater share of wallet, more account control, better unit economics, it opens up a lot more possibilities for growth. It opens up a lot more possibilities for profitability. And that small congested market, we need to be really careful about who we help and what we do for them. So in terms of your data center hosting company, in terms of your business continuity company, deciding how you're going to grow in a small congested market, we need to figure out where you've been successful, where your clients have been successful, how we can get more clients like that. And is there actually room to grow without going significantly wider in the nature of what we do for our clients? But in most cases, when it comes to business continuity, it's very far-fetched that you're going to be able to survive as a single location option. I can't imagine too many scenarios where a sophisticated IT director or CTO is going to come to you and is going to be cool about all their data living in a single location anymore. It just, I'm not that hands-on on IT anymore. I did that stuff earlier on in my career, but it seems really, really far-fetched that there actually are IT decision makers anymore who are betting the farm with all of their data in a single location anymore. So at the absolute minimum, you need a second or third location, even if you're just renting space in someone else's co-location facility. But yeah, there's some significant work that needs to be done with your business model, with your go-to-market, with your target audience. Small congested markets are very challenging. And if you want to do this profitably, there's some significant business model issues that you want to address in addition to the go-to-market and sales and marketing issues that come up with a data center hosting, with a data center business continuity type of company. Next question. How do we grow a co-location business in Latin America? That's a big one. The challenge in Latin America is, in many cases, the markets are kind of fragmented, especially when you look at Brazil compared to the rest of the continent. But you want to be very specific about the markets that you're going after. And it's very likely that you'll want to have a beachhead in one country before you expand significantly into other countries, just because of the culture issues, the financial issues, regulatory issues, very, very different kinds of markets. So in terms of growing your co-location business, it's the same issues growing in Latin America as anywhere else on the planet. Who your ideal clients are, what makes them happy, what makes you successful, why are they your case studies, why have they stayed with you for years, and how do you get more clients just like that? So you're building your ideal client profile, you're building out your buyer personas, you're figuring out the biggest goals and challenges that your primary and secondary buyer personas care the most about, and we're showing up early and often. Every once in a while, there's people that come to me like, but our region is different. They don't look online for this information. Okay, really? Okay, so you're champions of digital infrastructure that buy co-location. They don't have smartphones? Oh, no, they have smartphones. They don't watch YouTube videos? Oh, no, they watch YouTube videos. They never attend a webinar or watch podcasts or go to a review website. Oh, no, they do most of those things. Okay, so how are they actually different? Of course, you need to localize. It's a given that you need to be creating content in Spanish and Portuguese, depending on your market there. But so it's the same basic issues: is where have you been most successful? What does your ideal client profile look like? How do you build a target account list? How do you better understand how you can add value throughout the full buyer's journey for your most important buyer personas? And how do you consistently show up and execute so you're educating and building trust at scale with them throughout their full buyer's journey? Because rest assured, they have figured out search and they figured out social and they figured out all those things just like any other co-location buyer on the planet has done. And we need to figure out a way to show up early and often so that we're in on as many of those 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision as we possibly can. So we have significant surface area footprint and relationship building in place with them in the awareness and consideration stages of the journey, and aren't just showing up at the end at the decision stage and expecting modern miracles. So for growing your co-location business in Latin America, get super specific about where they're located, their company size, their industries, their business models, and then figure out a way for you, your team, to show up as the experts in your space, to show up as the teachers, the trusted advisors, the subject matter experts, the thought leaders, and the consultants, because no one wants to spend time with a vendor sales rep anymore until they're at the absolute end of the journey. The trick with the whole thing is to reposition your sales and account managers so they can show up early as the teachers, as the consultants, as the subject matter experts, so they can be the ones that ultimately significantly influence how your co-location buyers navigate their buyer's journey. So with that, we're just about at the halfway point for this week's Q&A show. So we'll take a quick break from our sponsor.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com. Now, back to Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A.
Hey, it's Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. And you are watching our weekly live Q&A show, the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. So, next question up that we'll be looking at this week is, how do we improve carbon neutral data center lead generation? So how do we improve the lead generation for carbon neutral data centers? Well, we need to figure out what business we're actually in. And in order to do that, one of the most important prerequisites is to figure out, does your company have product market fit? Do you know exactly who the ideal clients are? What products and services they purchase from you in the context of carbon neutral data centers? And do we know the price points and the frequencies at which they purchase? Along the same lines, we probably also should have a significant amount of clarity on our unit economics, what an average client spends with us, the duration of the agreements, what our cost of acquisition is, what our average sales cycle length is. If you're able to answer most of those questions, your company likely has product market fit, PMF, and you likely also have go-to-market fit. Big difference between go-to-market fit and product market fit is as you add more capital into your playbook, you have a high degree of confidence that things will continue to scale successfully. You'll continue to add the right kinds of clients. They'll be really happy. Your account managers will be delighted to be working with them. They'll be delighted to be working with your account managers, and you can continue to have positive word of mouth that continues to help you grow ever faster in your quest to grow your carbon neutral data center business. So as long as you have product market fit and you have go-to-market fit, there's likely a lot in common with the companies that are sitting on your case studies page. And from there, you have your ideal client profile. So you know at a company level where they're located, you know their size, you know their industries, you know their business model. And then we get into the really good. And from there, of course, you can build a target account list. So you know the couple hundred, the couple thousand companies, whatever it is, the defined list of companies that you want to be specifically generating leads from. Then we get into the really good stuff. We get into figuring out in these companies who is the kind of buyer that we need to be building relationships with. In the case of carbon neutral, maybe it's a chief sustainability officer. In a smaller company that doesn't have the focus on sustainability, maybe it's just a regular CTO or an IT director. Maybe it's a network operations person in a much larger company. And certain companies, maybe it's a CFO. Ultimately, based on the nature of your products and services that you provide within the marketplace for carbon neutral data centers, you'll figure out who the most important buyer persona is and who the second most important buyer persona is. But rest assured, in nearly all cases, it's decision by committee. So there's multiple stakeholders that are involved. So we're really just figuring out among the people that show up on the decision committee, how different are they in terms of their most important goals that they're trying to figure out professionally and their biggest challenges that they're struggling with professionally. Because it doesn't, the level of seniority isn't usually the biggest predictor of differences in behaviors. It usually depends on, again, this amalgamation of what they're trying to do professionally, what's on their job description, what they get evaluated on, what gets them the bonus. What if they screw up, gets them the opposite of the bonus, and what's stressing them out the most, their biggest struggles, their biggest professional challenges. That's how you're able to cluster those kinds of buyers together into persona. And once you do that, you should have a lot of clarity on what they're trying to figure out with carbon neutral data centers. You should have a lot of clarity on what they're struggling with the most when it comes to carbon neutral data centers. And the consensus on those goals and challenges will help you create a content calendar, will help you create an event calendar so that you and your team are able to show up consistently as early as possible, early and often, to be able to educate and build trust at scale with the most important kind of people in those specific target accounts and those specific companies that care the most about your company's carbon neutral data center services. So when it comes to improving your carbon neutral data center lead generation, be really clear about what kind of company they're from and what kind of stakeholders that you need to be generating these leads with. And then the second part of it is be very self-aware that most of the buyer personas that are interested in data center related products and services are doing a ton of research, self-directed research on their own before they're ready for a sales conversation. So we need to show up as the teachers, the consultants, and the subject matter experts, and not just be knocking on their door all the time, begging for sales meetings to come in and pitch and demo. All the selfish asks that are likely dominating a lot of what you're doing right now when it comes to lead generation. I'd also caution you to think about being really clear on how you define a lead, because in the data center industry over at DCSMI, we see a lot of people use the term lead and sales opportunity interchangeably. And they're really quite different things. When it comes to someone that's doing content marketing, that's doing sales enablement, a lead usually is someone that's a known identified contact at a particular company that's showing some degree of interest or potential fit in what you do. The reality, though, is usually you want a much higher level of interest, before you're able to determine that this person is showing qualification to pass on to the next level. So there's kind of this whole evolution of how somebody gets from a lead to a sales opportunity. Most of the time when people say that want to improve their lead generation, they don't just want to generate early stage leads. They want to successfully educate and build trust and nurture and accelerate as many of those good fit leads into sales opportunities as possible. So I would make sure to address that so that when it comes to whoever is charged with running your content engine and coordinating your webinar and events program, that you're using the same terminology and the language to align and be on the right page about all of this. So there's not a lot of miscommunication and potential for this getting off the rail, because the reality is you do need to have leads before you can have opportunities. If they're only showing up as opportunities, more than likely the people that those opportunities represented got educated by someone else, by another company, by another association, by an event, someone else that stacked the decks in their favor about what the purchase criteria should look like. So in a lot of ways, if you only first identify someone when they're at the opportunity stage, you probably got in too late. And in many cases, when you get in too late, the only thing that's going to win is cheaper, the race to the bottom. So most of the people that are watching this, you likely don't want to be the cheaper. You don't want to win because of cheaper. You want to win because you're better. You want to win because of better brand reputation in this space. You want to win on a host of other factors way beyond. You may want to be the low cost option at all. But by default, if you are absent for the first 83% of the buyer's journey, most of the time, the only thing you're going to have left to play is the price card. And that's the race to the bottom, and that kills your margins, and it's demoralizing and not a good place to be. So we need to get you in as early as possible so that your company, your sales, the members of your sales team, your account managers, your marketers are seen as the go-to experts on your space in anything and everything having to do with carbon neutral data centers. And the better job you can do in embracing that your future role of your go-to-market team is to show up early and often as possible in those 28 touch points as the go-to experts on carbon neutral data centers, the better your company's going to do at not only lead generation, but nurturing sales acceleration and growing your company. Next question up is, how can a data center market to target companies? How can a data center market to target companies? That's an excellent question. And the reality is there's a lot of convergence between marketing and sales roles that's now happening and needs to continue to happen. And the delineation between the two, been saying this for the better part of 6 months to a year already, is that marketing professionals need to be prepared to go much deeper into the buyer's journey than they ever have in the past throughout their career. And sales professionals need to be prepared to come in much earlier in the buyer's journey than they ever had in the past, so that there's true collaboration throughout the full buyer's journey. And this is a really big deal because so many of your ideal buyers for data center related products and services are just doing a ton of research on their own before they're ready for a sales conversation. So we need to make sure that you get in as early as possible. When it comes to your target companies, you should have that well documented. You should have an ideal client profile that identifies the geographic parameter, the company size parameter, the industry, the business models that these companies are located within. And then you have your target account list. And I'm a huge believer that your target account list, especially for long considered high value purchases, if it's not manually compiled, at least needs to be manually reviewed, because a lot of the solutions that pull together stuff get a lot of bad data if they're not humanly curated. But so let's assume that you've done all this, that you have someone in a sales role or sales operations or someone that's done a really good job of matching up what you intended your ideal client profile to be and the couple dozen or the couple hundred or the couple thousand target companies that are there. So what do you want to do to successfully market and sell and advance as many of those opportunities as possible? Is we need to understand who in those companies is going to care the most about our product or service that we're currently providing. We'll know about that typically because you've been in business a while, you probably have reviews or testimonials or case studies. And from there, you've identified who the most important kind of stakeholder is that shows up on the decision committee, and who the second most important kind of stakeholder is that shows up on the committee. And we'll designate them like your primary and your secondary buyer persona. And from there, we've done the research and figured out what they care most about, what they're struggling with. And we figured out a way that we're going to educate and build trust with our primary and secondary buyer persona about the things that they care most about that are stressing them out the most. And we're going to show up early and often. We're going to have a great blog and great podcast and great YouTube presence and LinkedIn presence. And we're going to address the exact issues that they care about most in their own words, not the words that we think that they care most about, but the words they actually do care about, because we've done our homework and we've done our research, and we have very buyer-centric approach to marketing. And we're recognizing that early on, they don't want to hear about our data center products and services. All they care about is their biggest goals and challenges as they navigate through the awareness and the consideration, the early and middle stages of their buyer's journey, where we can't show up as marketers. We can't show up as salespeople. We need to show up as teachers, consultants, subject matter experts, trusted advisors, and thought leaders. And if we show up, it's a beautiful thing, because we'll stay with them throughout most of their 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision. We're able to stack the decks very significantly in our company's favor with swaying the purchase criteria. If we're completely absent, or we only pinky toe show up, meaning that we only have one of the 28 touch points, well, we're leaving our company really vulnerable to another company that is more aggressive and doing a better job of educating and building trust at scale, being the ones to take up most of that surface area and much more significantly influence the criteria that's there. So that's the end goal, is that we want to spend so much time with them that we're nearly guaranteed to be on the short list. When we do this super effectively, in certain cases, our content and our events experiences may have completely neutralized all the other competitive options that are out there. But when it comes to how a data center company can market to target companies, for sure, make sure the companies are well defined, make sure the buyer personas are defined, make sure you understand the goals and the challenges of those buyer personas, and they have a great content strategy, great educational content strategy for events and resources that let you spend time significantly imparting, evangelizing, indoctrinating your target market with your worldview on how they should be looking at these related issues. That's really how you do marketing effectively. From a tactical playbook perspective, if you're that focused on a target account list, I would for sure be embracing account-based marketing. For relatively small companies, even without a lot of internal resources, LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a tremendous resource for executing on this. LinkedIn Campaign Manager, the LinkedIn ad system, when it's done right, can also be a phenomenally effective and even relatively low cost way of doing this. Typically, if you're going after target companies, you have figured out a way to get a lot of the waste and inefficiency out of your lead generation, lead nurturing, and new customer acquisition process. And as long as you have relatively healthy unit economics, all of those options should be on the table. For much larger companies, yeah, there's solutions and platforms and technologies that are several levels in sophistication above LinkedIn Campaign Manager. But for a lot of companies that are just getting started with relatively modest resources, where they want to invest a couple $1,000s a month in something like this, LinkedIn Sales Navigator and LinkedIn Campaign Manager are a great place to get started when it comes to things as basic as like loading up a target account list and targeting those companies and inviting them to download your latest ebook, register for your latest webinar. I'm a huge believer in webinars, and not just a one and done webinar strategy, but a webinar strategy that allows you to spend a significant amount of time with your prospects throughout the full buyer's journey, a full buyer's journey webinar program. And in terms of developing great relationships with the right people in these target accounts, you need a way to get that initial message in front of them. Once you do, you don't really need to go back to Sales Navigator anymore. You don't need to go back to Campaign Manager anymore. They're in your CRM, they're in your database, and you use a platform. I don't know, it could be something like HubSpot or something similar to stay in front of them and continue to introduce them to your newest resources, invite them to your latest webinars and latest events where you can continue to educate and build trust. So that's how a data center can market to target companies and be very realistic about what your ideal buyers want from your company throughout the full buyer's journey. Final question for today is, So this is a company that's at the intersection of like infrastructure and telecommunications. But so the question is, how can a network cabling solutions company improve its sales strategy? How can a networks cabling solutions company improve its sales strategy? I think the single biggest game changer for a company that does network cabling to improve its sales strategy is to start with a top-down CEO level buy-in that recognizes that going forward, your sales team needs to up its game tremendously in terms of the expertise that they bring to the table to its prospects and customers. So the company needs to invest in the professional development and continuing education of its sales team at a level like they never have before. So training and certification programs, and ongoing commitment, role playing, the sales team being able to show up more as teachers and consultants and trusted advisors and less like transaction focused salespeople is much, much, much more important than you've ever done in the past. And there's third-party organizations that can help with this if you don't want to build a program internally. Like Bixi has been around for decades. CompTIA probably has some interesting options around this as well at the intersection of networking. But like at the end of the day, what it really comes down to as a CEO level type commitment that says that when it comes to anything and everything having to do with network cabling, we want our team to be seen as world-class experts. And it's not just the engineers that are doing the actual work, the implementation, and the project manager that needs to be seen as experts. Everyone that's customer facing needs to be seen as experts, the sales, account managers, marketers. And it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, how do we objectively address these gaps in knowledge and education? Who's strongest? Who needs the most reinforcement? Do we have different levels of expertise? And more than likely, yes, because based on years of relevant experience, you'll have some people that are like at a PhD, MBA level with this, and you'll have some people that are at more junior level. But by taking the institutional knowledge of your most senior people and packaging this into podcast interviews and webinar presentations and working with the marketing members internally to have great printed content that are based on interviews so it gets the messaging right, you'll end up with your most senior level experts within the company. Then you'll have intermediate level and more junior level. Even the junior entry level ones, the marching orders basically should be that they need to be very enthusiastic consumers of your company's published thought leadership and your company's educational resources. So when they come across prospects and customers that are looking for this kind of information, they don't have to be the be-all end-all experts. They're just like the concierge or the tour guide, the tram driver that's driving them around the theme park, introducing them to all the great educational resources that your company has available to educate and build trust with your ideal clients based on having a relationship with them throughout the full buyer's journey, awareness and consideration, not just decision. The way most network cabling companies are still showing up is they're acting like it's still 10 years ago, and they're acting like their buyers have not figured out the self-propelled buyer's journey, which is just nonsense. When it comes to anything having to do with the data center or digital transformation, even your ideal clients that are in the later parts of their career are all using smartphones. They, for the most part, have figured out LinkedIn and YouTube and review websites, texting, all that stuff. And because of that, we need to show up where they are, not where we want them to be 3 to 6 months down the road. We need to actually show up where they are. And the way we show up where they are is we need to create this content, what I call conference grade content, where it's so good that it could go through a multi-level review process so like the editorial side of a conference decides that they want to have the best content at their conference possible. So from a competitive standpoint, there's no doubt in their mind that they're knocking it out of the park. So what does that mean? 8 or 9 months before a conference, you sit down and you prepare a title and an abstract, an outline of what you want to cover at that conference, and you submit it. And you're confident that it's adding so much value to their target audience, your target audience, that it's going to be accepted. It passes with flying colors. What's next after that? What's next after that is now that you've been accepted to speak at the conference, they put you and your bio and your photo up on their website and your session title and abstract. What's next after that? Maybe 6 or 8 weeks before the conference's advisory council wants to see your slides. They want to make sure that it's not an infomercial. They want to make sure that you're going to deliver a lot of value. So You prepare your slides, you follow through on what you promised in your abstract and your session title. You send in a couple dozen slides. You're like, wow, this looks amazing. The audience is going to love what you're going to do. And then day of conference shows up. You have the right people, right butts in the seats in the room. And you're looking around and you're like, okay, so there's a couple tests going on. One is, am I engaging with them? Are they participating? Is it interactive? Are most of the people that were sitting in the seats at the beginning of the session there at the end of the session, or did some walk out, or did a lot walk out? So that's one test. And then obviously the ultimate report card is the mobile app reviews. Did you get 5 out of 5 stars? Did people say, this is amazing, he could have got him for another half hour? By all means, invite him back next year. Can't wait to learn more. So those are the different levels of criteria that you'll go through to be able to achieve true conference grade content. Now, you need to be self-aware enough that you have these checks and balances internally so that someone is acting like the conference manager or your webinar manager to make sure that you're delivering value at that level, that if there were 3 or 4 or 5 independent checks and balances, that you're highly confident that the people that come to your webinars stay for the whole webinar, can't wait to bring their friends and their colleagues and recommend you to their boss, and are giving you 5 out of 5 on the survey and can't wait to speak to your sales team to talk about next steps. That's the level to be competitive if you want to level up on your sales strategy for network cabling to be competitive in today's marketplace. Those are the kinds of things that you should be thinking about for a network cabling solutions company that wants to improve its sales strategy. The lines are now tremendously blurred, and in order for your sales team to show up early and often, they need to show up as teachers, trusted advisors, subject matter experts, and consultants. It's no longer enough to just show up at like a transaction-focused salesperson who's just trying to make quota. Especially with highly technical, somewhat cynical IT buyers, they'll see through it in a heartbeat. So ultimately, these are big culture changes that need to start from the top down for a company that does something related to network cabling in and around the data center industry. So that was the final question that I'll be addressing in this week's Data Centers Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Live Q&A show. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. We're all about elevating the role of data center sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To make sure that you stay up to date on what we're working on over at DCSMI that can help you grow professionally, help your team grow, and your company grow in and around the data center industry, make sure that you are subscribed to our weekly email newsletter. You can get signed up directly on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. And sign up for the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter that gets delivered directly to your email inbox every Sunday. With that, I wish you great success in growing your data center related business, and we look forward to seeing you back next week. Take care now.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com.